Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is Imagining Tech, August 28th, 2019. So today's video is going to be my most simple and basic explanation of what a blockchain is, how it functions, and what makes it important. Now, crypto is a global phenomenon. You might have heard of it before: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Litecoin, EOS. But you don't exactly understand why it is so important. And the reason that it is so important is because of a technology called the blockchain. Now, we've had digital currencies in the past. Bitcoin was not the first digital currency. But what makes Bitcoin unique is that it is the first currency, cryptocurrency, using the blockchain. It is the first currency online that uses the blockchain. Now, I want to explain to you what exactly a blockchain is in the most simple terms that I can. A blockchain is a database. And the most important thing to understand about it is a database that is distributed. It is a database that is hosted through nodes that exist all over the world. Now, this is quite different than the model that we are accustomed to. In the regular client-server model that we are accustomed to, usually you, being the client, being the consumer who wants to go to an app, for example, let's just say you want to go to youtube.com. In order to go to youtube.com, what happens in the background, the technicals that happen in the background, is you go to your browser, you type in youtube.com, and you get to youtube.com. But what you're really doing is you are searching for a specific IP address, and that IP address is going to lead you to servers that YouTube owns, that YouTube controls. So basically what you've done is you've used several technologies such as domain name service, such as IP addresses and routing, to reach your destination of YouTube. Now, once you've reached your destination of YouTube, you're free to easily interact with YouTube, and that's great, and we all love YouTube. So what is the problem, and why is blockchain making YouTube better? Well, the client-server model is great. It's worked great up until this point. But the problem is, when you connect up to YouTube, it's like I said before, YouTube owns those servers. YouTube, because they own the servers, they essentially own your data. So this video I'm making, for example, YouTube owns it. Sure, it's my video and I'm uploading it so people can watch it and people can view it and people can share it, but YouTube can decide whether they want to take it down. YouTube can decide, YouTube has full control of this video because I'm uploading it to their server, which they control. Now, blockchain, because of its being a distributed database that nobody controls, meaning there's no central point in this distributed database, you essentially own your data. Or for me in this example, I own my video. The only thing that I need to understand as a user in this new distributed database model is that if I hold my private keys, I have access to my data or my content. I can now retrieve. My private key is like a magic key that I can go into this distributed database system and find my content and pull it or download it or whatever, upload, whatever you need to do. I can take it because it belongs to me. And nobody owns my data. No longer does YouTube own my data. I now own my data. And that is what is so big and is so powerful in the simplest terms about blockchain. And that is what Bitcoin brought to the world. That was the innovation that Bitcoin brought to the world. And Bitcoin's function it functioned as a cryptocurrency. If you read the original Satoshi white paper, Bitcoin was intended to be a currency, a peer-to-peer currency that exists online that people could use to interact with each other, not controlled by a government. Now, governments, up until the invention of Bitcoin, have controlled every major currency from the beginning of time. Governments control the money. Governments create the money. Governments create the money in 2019, the fiat money, out of pure debt, out of pure nothingness. They control the money supply. So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that is meant to escape you from that system. Using the blockchain, you no longer have to interact with a fiat-based system. But I won't get too deep into that. If you want to learn more about why Bitcoin can be powerful, I suggest you do your own research, look at some more Bitcoin videos, because it's truly fascinating stuff. Now, I want to take it to the next level, and what came after Bitcoin was a technology called Ethereum. Now, Ethereum uses the same sort of distributed database system that the Bitcoin uses, called the blockchain, but it took it one step further. Now, basically, Ethereum introduced what are called smart contracts. Smart contracts are, simply put, just binary if-and statement computer codes that can then run on top of the blockchain, on top of the distributed database. So now you can have an if-and statement that says, if this happens, then do this. Basically allowing you to execute code on top of a blockchain and making blockchains programmable so that we can now have decentralized applications, what they call decentralized applications, run on top of this distributed database system. Now, this is infinitely powerful to understand. Being able to run applications such as YouTube on your phone or on your computer changes the game completely, because now we have completely shifted away from the server client model and aspects further beyond a currency system. We can now have the possibility to run completely decentralized organizations that have no center, applications that have no center. Governments, once again, and central authorities will no longer be needed because of decentralized systems. Now, one thing that's very important to understand is that a lot of people say, okay, well, that's cool. You have a decentralized or a distributed database. Why do I need an Ethereum token? I understand why I need the Bitcoin token. It's a peer-to-peer currency. That makes sense. But if Ethereum is not trying to be a currency, it's trying to be a distributed database, well, why do I need an Ethereum token? Where does this currency come from? I don't understand that. And that's very simple, or I'm going to try to make it very simple. In order for a blockchain or a distributed database to be secure, you have to understand that, just like in the example we used before, YouTube was owning all your data and it was monetizing your data. It created a platform off of your data, so they have a business model that allows them to store your data for you. In a distributed database model, there has to be some sort of economic incentive or business model for the distributed database to work the same way that it works in the server client model. So in order for that to be possible, you need some way to pay in this case the miners, because that's, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the miners is what they're called. They're essentially the nodes on the network, the people who create the network and secure it and make sure that the network is always having consensus. And what I mean by consensus is to make sure that the network is always agreeing, because this is a distributed ledger database system that has to agree at all times to prove that it has integrity and to prove that nobody's tampered with it, to prove that nobody's messed with it. It has to be in agreement at all time. It has to be at consensus at all time. Now, that is why a cryptocurrency needs to be created, because you need to pay for that incentive. You need to pay miners or node operators in order to do that work of securing the chain and making sure that there is consensus. So when you hear people talk about consensus models, that is all they mean. The original consensus model for the first distributed database of Bitcoin was proof of work. And then with the advent of Ethereum, Ethereum is also proof of work. They have plans on the roadmap to change to proof of stake, which will be slightly different in that you will be no longer needing to run a computer in order to become a node in the network. Now you will simply buy Ethereum tokens, stake them into a smart contract, and then secure the network that way. If you want to learn more about that, I definitely suggest you do a deep dive into that as well. But I'm going to continue on. Now, the third blockchain, I remember I said we're going to talk about 3 blockchains in this video, is EOS. Now, EOS is currently a smart contract platform that was built after Ethereum that currently is one of the most scalable, high throughput, fast transactional blockchains that exist in the space today. How does EOS achieve this high throughput feeless transaction? Because it is feeless. I forgot to mention that. It is completely free to use. And of course, nothing is free in life, so definitely do a deep dive on that as well. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but basically the way they make it free is because of inflation. But I'm not going to get too deep into that. But the way they were able to make EOS a lot more scalable and a lot more faster is by using a different model of consensus or a different model of agreement. Instead of using the model that Bitcoin innovated, which was the proof of work model, so you, instead of having that model where you have a miner here, there, North Korea, China, America, England, doing some sort of complicated math problem on their computer that their computer is solving to verify and keep consensus and agreement on chain, instead of that proof of work model that was very hardware intensive, very electric intensive, we're going to go with a different model that is less hardware intensive and less electric consumption, called delegated proof of stake. Now, delegated proof of stake, I definitely also recommend you do a deep dive on, but in the simplest way I can explain it, a delegated proof of stake is just a way of reaching consensus on chain through node operators. Instead of miners, you have node operators, people who are incentivized, because remember, blockchains are all about incentivizing work. So there are people who are incentivized. In EOS's case, they have 21 block producers, and the block producers are the node operators, or what would be the equivalent of a miner in Bitcoin or Ethereum. They are node operators. So there's 21 node operators called block producers on the EOS network that basically produce blocks, keep the chain moving, and make sure that the chain is always in consensus. And because of that, because of the limited amount of block producers, they're able to reach a much higher throughput, making the blockchain or the distributed database infinitely more scalable, infinitely more fast, infinitely more user-friendly and easy to use. So, in closing, I hope after watching this video, you have a much better understanding of what a blockchain is, how a blockchain functions, and what blockchains are going to mean for the future. Blockchain is a technology that is able to eliminate third parties of all kinds. This has the potential to be infinitely huge, and only the imagination will be able to tell us just how big this technology will be able to transform our society. Because no longer do we need centralized authorities to run our lives, whether that be in the form of a bank, whether that be in the form of a government, whether that be in the form of a social media platform. Like, we will be able to own our data, our ideas, our money, and that can have infinite game-changing effects on the way society is going to be run going forward. So thank you guys so much again for watching this video. Have a great day, guys. Share this video to somebody who you think might need to understand a little bit better how blockchain functions. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.